Hello and welcome to ADTV, and today you catch up with us on the Taswood complex, and the lake we've chosen to fish is Osprey. Now the reason we've chosen this lake is because it's absolutely packed full of mixed fish, and that's hopefully is going to lean us exactly what we want to talk you through today, and what I would say are the forgotten species in match fishing. Now I'm talking about your roach, your rudd, your skimmers, perch, small tench, stuff like that tend to not get fished for, but at this time of year, certainly we're now coming into spring, it's still cold, the fishing's hard, they can play a huge part into match fishing and actually win matches where some people will sit there and fish for one or two carp, and you could beat them doing this. I'm in quite a privileged position that I speak to a lot of anglers, I work with a lot of anglers, and I so many times, week after week, I go into work on a Monday, how'd you get on at the weekend, and the same answer gets repeated. I had one carp on the method, or I managed to catch one down the edge late on, but apart from that the day was hard. And they've not even thought about trying to catch bits and pieces when it's harder. The middle part of the match, certainly this comes into its own. So what we're going to talk you through today is chopworm and caster fishing, how I would do it, and this is my preferred sort of bits fishing, as we say. So any sort of smaller fish that potentially you wouldn't catch on your hard pellets or your big lumps of corn and stuff like that. So let's talk about the baits to start with. Now the first thing I want to touch on is I understand that worm is very, very expensive bait. So hopefully there's a couple of tips here that you can bulk it out and make it that little bit cheaper if you want to go down this method. So bait wise, I've got some casters, some worms, some maggots, some ground bait and some liquid. So what I do when I get down to my session is I'll chop a handful of worms up. Then to that I'll add some casters and then some of the liquid as well. So the liquid, the chopped worm, is releasing loads of amino acids, and then to make it slightly cheaper I bulk it out of a real natural dark ground bait. You can also use molehill soil if there's any around your venue. That's a very good tip to make it even cheaper. But a natural dark ground bait, and then put that all together, it makes it slightly cheaper, bulks it out, but it lets you catch fish that potentially you wouldn't have even fished for in the past. So that's the baits I've got. Rig wise, I'll talk you through now. There's two rigs when I'm fishing chopworm. So the first one is a really positive rig. I do like to be really aggressive when I'm fishing chopworm and caster. One, because let's face it, if you're trying to compete with sort of 8, 9, 10 pound carp that commercials are famous for nowadays, you need to catch a lot of smaller fish to compete with those weights. So be positive, and the main rig that I'll attack is, to start with the elastic, is the slick orange, and now that's perfect for me if I'm going to catch hopefully some bigger skimmers or some slightly bigger roach stuff. That handles those perfectly. And if you do hook a roe carp, you're not saying that fishing worm you're not going to catch a carp, you're going to get that in as well. So fairly heavy elastic for that. Main line would be 0.15 with 0.13 hook length. So again, fairly heavy. Some people would use that for carp fishing, but I don't think they're shy. You need to be quite aggressive with it. Float wise, fairly heavy bulky float, because I want to fish a big sort of half a dendrobina, a whole dendrobina on this rig. So I want it to be really stable and hold it there and wait for a real positive bite. With my shotting pattern I'd have a bulk and two droppers, and I'd set it perhaps 2 inches over depth. I just mentioned there, I want to be positive. You get a lot of indications and touches on worms, so they're sort of smaller fish nibble in the end. You want to wait for a big slide away bite, and hopefully it will be a slightly better fish. So that's my positive rig. And then I also have a more negative rig. Let's face it, it doesn't always work like that. You don't always catch the bigger fish, and sometimes a net full of those can really mean the difference between placing higher in a match, winning the match, or coming absolutely nowhere. So my negative rig will be slightly lighter elastic. I've got green slick from Matrix, and then line wise is 0.13 and then 0.11 hook length. So we are lightening it down quite a bit. A real small light pencil float and a shotting pattern that's completely strung out through the whole rig with a tiny hook, maybe a 20 and 18, something like that. And that rig could be for fish through the water. If I wanted to loose feed sort of maggots and casters over the top where I'm fishing, get them intercepting, that just falls down nicely, and it's just a bit neater and a bit better for those smaller fish. So they're the two rigs, one positive, one negative. And the last thing I'll mention before we get onto the fishing is how I feed it. Now I've mentioned the word positive and aggressive enough times for you to realise I'm not going to be putting a little pinch of bait in. You've got to catch a lot of fish. So what I do is I get a big ball of the ground bait, molehill or whatever you've gone for. To that, I'll add a pinch of my mix that I told you about earlier. So a pinch of casters, chopped worm, all that liquid, and a few maggots go in there. And I'll probably put one big ball in on the spot to start with, and then I'll regularly top it up. But I tend to fish this, what I call it, fish it out. So I'll put a big ball in, fish it until your bites stop, put another big ball in, and then fish it out again. I think if you keep introducing bait over top, and one, you run the risk of feeding them out of it and they all disappear, or two, you bring loads of roach into your swim up in the water and you can't get a big nice worm down to the bottom. So there's a few different ways to fish, and think about your match fishing. Like I said, it's not all about carp that we get told that you must catch carp to win matches nowadays. There's a lot of matches get won by doing this. Catch yourself some fish, and if you keep putting weight in your net, you're going to be a hard man or woman to beat on the bank. So let's get on with that now, and hopefully we'll get some fish on the bank. Well, there we go. What a brilliant way to end a thoroughly enjoyable day fishing for bits and pieces where we could have been sat struggling for carp. And unfortunately, it's a keep net only policy here when you're in a match, so we can't shoot an end shot, but I promise you, we've had a load of these, a mixed bag of roach as well, and I would not have had the weight that I've had with silverfish had I sat here and fished for carp. So certainly, when the weather's like this, before the carp really get active, it's something to think about, and perhaps put it into your match fishing this weekend.